All right, let's talk about something we've all been through. You spend hours, maybe even days learning something new, and then poof, a few weeks later, it's just gone, vanished from your brain. So frustrating, right? But what if I told you there's a way to build knowledge that actually sticks? And get this, it's a method that was born out of the Cold War space race, and it could completely change how you learn, well, anything. Let's get into it.
Yeah, we all know that feeling, don't we? You cram for a big exam, you absolutely nail it, and then a month later, someone asks you about the topic and crickets. It's like you never even learned it. This whole cram and forget cycle is just so common, but man, is it an inefficient way to actually learn. It really does feel like your brain is a leaky bucket, doesn't it? You pour all this information in, and it just seems to leak right out the bottom. And here's the thing, that's not just a feeling. It's a real, well-documented phenomenon. And in some fields, the consequences of this are, well, they're pretty staggering.
I mean, just look at this number. We're talking 30 to 50%. Some universities were seeing attrition rates that high, basically half their students dropping or failing tough required courses like organic chemistry. And that kind of number tells you something. It wasn't just a student problem, it was a teaching problem. It was rooted in this linear, one-and-done approach to learning. Okay, so where did the solution finally come from? You might think it came from a university education department or a psychology lab, but no. It actually came from the intense geopolitical pressure of the Cold War. So picture this. It's 1957. The Soviet Union launches Sputnik, the first artificial satellite, and it sends a complete shockwave through the United States. All of a sudden, there's this massive national panic, this urgency to overhaul science and math education, and fast. This panic leads to a historic meeting of some of the country's best minds at a place called Woods Hole. And it's there that a cognitive psychologist named Jerome Bruner steps up and proposes a pretty radical new idea. And this quote, this was at the absolute core of his belief. Bruner basically argued that complexity isn't the barrier we think it is. He said you could take the most advanced topics, we're talking physics, algebra, you name it, and introduce them in a really simple foundational way to anyone, even a child. And then you just build on that foundation over time. This single idea would become the bedrock for a whole new way of thinking about education.
And he gave it a name, the spiral curriculum. The idea itself is actually pretty simple, but it's also incredibly profound. Instead of learning a topic once and just moving on for good, you circle back to it again and again and again. And each time you come back, you go just a little bit deeper.
Okay, so what does this actually look like in practice? I mean, how do you build one of these spirals? Well, it really just boils down to three key principles.
First, you've got repetition. This is your main weapon against that natural process of forgetting. But, and this is super important, it's not just mindless, boring repetition. That's where the second principle comes in, progressive complexity. Every single time you revisit a topic, you have to add more depth, more detail, you go deeper. And finally, you have integration. Honestly, this is where the real magic happens. You're constantly connecting the new stuff to what you already know, building this strong web of knowledge instead of just a long list of isolated facts.
Let's make this concrete. A medical school curriculum is a perfect example. So in year one, a med student learns the absolute basics of, say, cardiac physiology. You know, the four chambers of the heart, the general path that blood takes. That's it. That's the foundation, the first loop of the spiral.
Okay, so fast forward a bit. That same student comes back to the heart, they revisit it, but now, because they have that basic foundation, they're ready for the next layer of complexity. Now they can learn how to read an ECG or dig into the nitty-gritty of the ion channels and electrical signals that actually make the heart beat. And then, finally, in their clinical years, they spiral back to the heart one more time. But this time, it's all about integration and application. They're taking everything they've learned, from basic anatomy to complex electrophysiology, and using it to diagnose and manage real patients with real problems, like heart failure or arrhythmias. See? They didn't just memorize facts. They built a framework they can actually use. Now, this whole thing isn't just some nice, intuitive idea. It is solidly backed by decades of cognitive science about how our brains actually form and keep long-term memories. So what's the science here? Why does this work so well? Well, it taps into a few powerful brain hacks. First, it uses something called spaced repetition. That just means you revisit information at bigger and bigger intervals, usually right at the moment you're about to forget it. Doing this forces you into active recall. That's the mental workout of pulling information out of your brain, which is way, way more powerful for memory than just passively rereading it. And all of this work, this repetition and recall, builds what psychologists call a schema. Think of it as a really strong, organized mental network where every new piece of info has a logical place to connect. Yeah, this building block analogy is honestly perfect for it. In a traditional linear learning model, it's like you're just stacking blocks one on top of the other. If you pull one out from the bottom, the whole tower can come crashing down. But with the spiral method, every time you revisit a topic, it's like you're adding mortar between all the blocks. You're reinforcing the connections, making the entire structure stronger, more stable, and way less likely to fall apart. And this isn't just theory. This approach has been put into practice and studied in all sorts of fields, from medicine to chemistry, and the results are pretty compelling. So let's see exactly how it stacks up against the old school way of doing things.
I mean, this chart really makes the difference crystal clear, doesn't it? The traditional curriculum is a one-time linear path. You learn it, you're done. The spiral is all about repeating and deepening that knowledge. And look at the integration. It's low in the traditional model, but it's super high in the spiral. And that leads to the big payoff, higher retention, and this is so important, an earlier link between the theory you're learning and how you'd actually use it in the real world.
Okay, but let's be real for a second. It's not some magic bullet that solves everything. For a spiral curriculum to actually work, it has to be planned out really, really carefully. If you just repeat the exact same information over and over without adding any new depth, it just gets boring and pointless. And if the connections between the topics aren't made super clear, you can actually end up creating more confusion. So, why does any of this matter to you? Well, because you can take this exact same framework and apply it to literally anything you want to learn. Doesn't matter if it's a new language, a coding skill, or how to play the guitar. So here it is. This is your new playbook, a simple memory hook you can use. Step 1, learn the absolute fundamentals. Just get the big picture. Step 2, a few days or a week later, revisit it. And don't just reread your notes. That's too passive. Try to explain it out loud from memory. Step 3, deepen your understanding. Add a new layer, maybe a related concept or a more advanced technique. Then, step 4, and this is crucial, apply it. Actually do something with it. Write a short paragraph in that new language. Code one tiny feature. And finally, step 5, repeat the whole cycle. This deliberate process, this is how you build mastery that actually lasts.
So I'm going to leave you with a question to think about. What's one thing you really want to learn right now? Instead of trying to swallow it all in one go, how could you design your own spiral for it? What would that first simple loop look like? And what new layer could you add in the second loop? Because this deliberate looping process, it's not just a better way to study, it's a better way to think. It's how you build knowledge that truly becomes a part of who you are.